All right, everybody, what is going on? We have made it to the weekend, a good Saturday morning, and we are going to continue on with our little video series, counting down the most valuable players on the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. We are now down to the top three. We have worked our way all the way to the top three, so we are really in rarefied air now, and today we're going to be doing number three, going to be wrapping up this list over the next couple of days, get it done before the end of the month for sure. And obviously, this is all about celebrating and honoring the team that, against most expectations, won the Super Bowl last year. This is how you celebrate such a good outcome. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks. And today's player is going to be a guy who plays a position of somewhat less value than other positions. So the fact that he's here should tell you how good he was. We're talking about Ernest Jones here. Ernest Jones, off-ball, middle linebacker for the Seahawks defense. There's a few different things that go into this one. So removing ourselves just from talking about what happened in 2025 for a second, let's keep in mind how little Ernest Jones is getting paid relative to his play. Before the season started, he agreed to an extension of about $9 million a year, which, I mean, given how good he played last year and given all he provided, is basically, it feels like pretty close to 60% of what he should probably get. So just on that level, the value is there because he was willing to accept an extension like that. And I know part of it was because he was hurt, and I know because he had been battling chronic injuries throughout his career, but regardless, the fact that we have this guy on a $27 million 3-year deal is pretty incredible. But that's not really what we're here to talk about. It is just something that I think factors into the equation here. We're talking about his play. Now, Ernest Jones did miss 2 games last year. So it wasn't completely clean. I will acknowledge that. He did miss 2 games, regular season games, but in the grand scheme of things, when you play a position like linebacker, you should probably be expected to miss a couple games. It's a very physical position. It's not realistic for a player to be able to grind out 17 games season after season. And I think the fact that it was just 2 games is, if anything, something we should be kind of relieved by. And then you have the actual level of play. 126 tackles. And remember, there are not as many tackles to go around on this defense as there would be on others because there are so many other great players. 5 interceptions and all-pro second team. So there's some incredible stuff happening with the way Ernest Jones played in 2025. And I want to go back to the general thing that I say whenever I talk about this defense. This Seattle defense lives in nickel, which means they have light boxes. They do not put a lot of players up near the line of scrimmage most of the time. And yet, they have the 3rd best run defense in football by yards per game allowed, and they have the number 1 run defense in terms of yards per carry allowed. And there are a lot of reasons why that is. There's Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, there's Nick Eamon, there's Devin Witherspoon, but Ernest Jones is a big piece of that as the primary off-ball linebacker. So a lot of that credit goes to him. If you like sports, then the best way to make them even better and more exciting is using the Prize Picks app, where it always feels good to be right. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players and build lineups with a few taps. Whatever sport you're into, and obviously we are now firmly into the NFL offseason, so we're all about baseball, we got some basketball, we got some hockey, whatever it is you like, Prize Picks gives you a fun way to stay locked in while you're watching. Definitely make sure to use the promo code HMA. Prize Picks is hooking up users with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. If you use that promo code, that is HMA. I've had a great time on Prize Picks so far, so definitely get on over to it, check it out, and make sure to get your lineups. And don't forget about Team Picks, where you can pick winners, spreads, and totals on any major game. So download the app now, use HMA, and get on over to Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And remember, always gamble responsibly. So I think that's an important aspect of this conversation when you're talking about Ernest Jones. You might look at that tackle total, 126, and say, oh, okay, that's good, that's okay, but doesn't make a lot of plays in the backfield, only had half a sack all season. And you're like, oh, okay, what's really special here? What's special is the fact that he is one of the most crucial pieces of a run defense that, despite not having to deal with a lot of carries, because remember, teams don't run the ball against Seattle that much because they frequently fall behind and because they know that it's really hard to run the ball on Seattle. So despite that, he's still putting up numbers. And the numbers he puts up are very meaningful and impactful. So that's one piece of it right there. But the coverage angle might be even bigger. Let's talk about that for a second. 5 interceptions, leading the team, one of the highest totals in the league for a linebacker especially. That's incredible. And it's not just the interceptions. This is not a guy who's getting burnt all game and then gets a pick every now and then. Ernest Jones allowed 0 touchdowns in coverage last year, and most of the yards he allowed were yak, by the way. Very few air yards, like about an average of 2 yards per target, and 3 air yards per completion, and 420 yards over 15 games. That's not even 30 yards a game. So that is some pretty phenomenal coverage for a guy who supposedly, and I know that the raw numbers don't always tell you everything you need to know about coverage skills. Coverage was supposed to be Ernest Jones's biggest weakness. This was supposed to be the area that he wasn't very good in. This was supposed to be the thing that was an issue for EJ. And for him to have this kind of a season, and I understand that, once again, a big reason why he's able to do this is because his teammates are so good and they're supporting him. But you need to understand that when we traded for Ernest Jones, the narrative was he was good against the run. He was a really good blitzer, one of the best blitzing linebackers in football, but he wasn't very good in coverage. He didn't have great cover skills. And I understand that there's a reason why people said that, and it hasn't completely gone away. But when you're getting these kind of numbers out of your linebacker in coverage, you've got nothing to be upset about. So, bottom line, whatever you want to take away from him, you have to acknowledge that the end result was brilliant. So, you've got that element to it as well. And that's really important because this Seattle defense faces a lot of passing attempts because they usually play from ahead and teams are usually trying to catch up against them. And they're also usually just trying to throw the ball because they know that running the ball on this team is really hard. Now, anybody who knows Pro Football Focus is probably aware this is not a player that they think is very good. In fact, they think he's below replacement level, which is insane. I always say there are players that make you realize that Pro Football Focus doesn't have everything nailed down yet. And they may never get there, especially defensive players that play in zone defense. I think there's just some kind of a gap there. And I think Pro Football Focus has even admitted this. It's really hard to know how to assign value to a player on defense when they play zone. And the fact that Ernest Jones had the coverage numbers he did and had a 48 coverage grade, like that's tough to reconcile. So, for whatever that's worth, they don't really like him. So we do have that element as well. For whatever reason, Pro Football Focus doesn't think he's a very good player. But then there's one other thing with Ernest Jones that needs to be discussed when you're talking about this season. It's not the playoff performance, although he was good in the playoffs. He had a pick of Brock Purdy in the first playoff game, forced a fumble on Jake Tonges, led the NFL in solo tackles for the postseason in just 3 games. So he was good in the postseason. I'm not here to say otherwise. But the thing about Ernest Jones that maybe weighs just as heavily as his on-field performance in a weird way was some of the stuff he did off the field, some of the stuff he does that doesn't show up in a box score. And I know I say that a lot with these players, but in the case of Ernest Jones, it's very strong. Obviously, he's something of an on-field leader for this defense. But the moment that a lot of people remember from this last season is a game in, I think it was November, with Sam Darnold at his lowest moment, where Sam Darnold had, I don't want to simplify things too much, effectively thrown away a very important game against a division rival, having one of the worst games of his career, and on some level, maybe validating a lot of the fears that people had about Sam Darnold as a quarterback and what he would do, what he would be, and whether or not we could count on him when the going got tough. It was one of the low moments of the season for Darnold, in a season that, he did turn the ball over a lot. Nobody's doubting that. He did have low moments like most quarterbacks do, but the lowest moment where he was the main culprit for losing a game to the Rams that the rest of the team played more or less good enough to win in. And Ernest Jones was the most vocal player coming out of that game, saying, "No, we support this guy. This is our guy." And he didn't back down from that at all. He didn't try to see the other perspective. And on some level, people would say, "Well, what else is he going to say? It's not that impressive. It was in the middle of the season. The season was still going well. What else was he going to come out and say?" And that's true. But the way in which he came out and said what he said, and if you guys follow the Seahawks at all, you know what I'm talking about. The way he said it, the way he was so confident in what he was saying, and the result of that is so stark, it's hard for you not to care, because the Seahawks did not lose another game the rest of the year after that moment. And Darnold had more lows, but he also had more highs and ultimately came through when we needed it. So it's really hard to talk about the 2025 Seahawks and not mention the fact that it was Ernest Jones who came out and stood up for Sam Darnold in a moment where he had kind of given away a game that the defense had played brilliantly in, and potentially it ended up not going this way, but could have potentially cost the team of the division, because that was a division game. And at the time, we didn't know that the Rams were going to fade late in the season the way that they did. So there was this sense that that was the moment when the team really galvanized in a way. And Ernest Jones was at the head of that because he was the most vocal person. So when you're talking about the 2025 Seattle Seahawks, Ernest Jones will be remembered for being a great player on the field, for being a leader on the defense, but also a leader on the team as a whole, for the way that he had belief that Sam Darnold was the guy, and he was rewarded on that count, because the next time we played the Rams after that, Sam Darnold led a miracle comeback, and then the time after that, Sam Darnold played maybe the best game of his career. So that stuff stands out, and it's why I think Ernest Jones is the third most valuable player to this team for the 2025 season. All right, so that's going to do it. I'm going to go and get on out of here. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Maybe another video later today, maybe not. We'll see. But Ernest Jones is my number 3. We've got 2 players left. Most of you guys already know who they are, but we'll talk about the why and the how over the next couple of days. See you guys soon. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think. Have a good rest of your day. And yeah, Ernest Jones, man. Really, really special.